The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never seen such chaos. Representatives from over 300 species filled the massive chamber, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, telepathic waves, and electronic pulses. At the center of it all stood High Chancellor Zektar, his forearms raised high as he tried to restore order. Silence. His voice boomed through the translation matrix. We are here to discuss the human situation, not to panic like frightened younglings. The Vorthan ambassador, a crystalline being that sparkled with nervous energy, spoke first. Chancellor, you cannot possibly understand the gravity of this situation. The humans have done something unprecedented in galactic history. Ambassador Krill of the Hegemony, a tall reptilian figure, hissed his agreement. They have rejected our authority. No species has ever dared to do such a thing. The implications are terrifying. 3 months ago, the Galactic Council had issued Standard Directive 847 to the human homeworld of Earth. It was a routine matter, they thought. Humanity was a young species, barely 200 years into space travel. They had established colonies on 12 worlds and were expanding rapidly, but they were still considered primitive by galactic standards. The directive was simple: cease all military expansion and submit to Council oversight for the next 500 years. It was standard procedure for aggressive young species. The Council had used this approach successfully for millennia, preventing countless wars and maintaining galactic peace. But humanity's response had been unlike anything the Council had ever received. Let me read their exact words again, Chancellor Zektar said, pulling up the holographic display. The translation into galactic standards still sent chills through the assembled representatives. To the Galactic Council, and all who would impose their will upon free peoples, humanity respectfully declines your directive. We recognize no authority over our sovereign worlds except that which we freely choose to accept. We will continue to expand, explore, and defend ourselves as we see fit. Any attempt to enforce your directive will be met with appropriate response. The message was signed simply, Admiral Sarah Chun, Supreme Commander of Human Space Forces. The Altiron delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a mechanical suit, sparked with indignation. The audacity is beyond comprehension. Do they not understand what they are challenging? The Council represents the combined might of 300 civilizations. Perhaps, said the Chulith ambassador, his tentacles writhing nervously. But our intelligence reports are troubling. The humans have been preparing for this moment. Chancellor Zektar nodded grimly. The intelligence was indeed troubling. Humanity had been building warships at an unprecedented rate. Their technology, while primitive in some areas, showed disturbing innovations in others. Most concerning of all, they had formed alliances with several minor species that the Council had long ignored. The real question, spoke the ethereal collective's representative, its voice echoing from another dimension, is what we do now. We cannot simply ignore this challenge to our authority. The debate that followed was heated. Some called for immediate military action to crush this upstart species before their rebellion could spread. Others urged caution, noting that humanity's response, while defiant, had not been overtly aggressive. They haven't attacked anyone, pointed out the Benthic Union's ambassador, her aquatic form floating in its environmental tank. They've simply refused to obey. Perhaps we can negotiate. Negotiate? The hegemony ambassador's tail lashed angrily. They must be made an example of. If other young species see that defiance goes unpunished, chaos will spread throughout the galaxy. As the arguments continued, a new piece of intelligence arrived that changed everything. The Surveillance Division had detected massive human fleet movements. Ships were departing from Earth and the human colonies, but not in retreat. They were advancing toward the borders of Council space. They're not just refusing to obey, Chancellor Zektar announced to the stunned assembly. They're coming toward us. The hall erupted in pandemonium. This was unprecedented in the 3 million years of recorded galactic history. No species had ever dared to march toward the Council's core worlds. The very idea was considered impossible, suicidal. How many ships? Demanded the Vorthan ambassador. The intelligence officer, a multi-eyed Gekrani, consulted his data pad. Conservative estimates suggest over 2,000 vessels, Chancellor. And the numbers are growing as reserve fleets join the main force. 2,000 ships against the might of 300 civilizations. The Altiron delegate sparked with what might have been amusement. Surely this is some form of elaborate suicide. But not everyone was so confident. The Council's own military analysts had been studying human warfare for years, and their reports were not comforting. Humans fought differently than other species. Where most galactic civilizations preferred surgical, efficient conflicts with minimal casualties, humans embraced what they called total war. Their military doctrine is unlike anything we've seen, reported General Thakmore of the Council Defense Force. They don't just fight to achieve political objectives. They fight to completely destroy their enemy's ability to make war. They call it unconditional surrender. The concept was foreign to most Council species. Wars in the galaxy were typically brief, formal affairs with clear rules and limited objectives. The idea of fighting until your enemy was completely helpless was considered barbaric. "Surely you exaggerate," said the Chulith ambassador. "No species could sustain such destructive conflicts." On the contrary, General Thakmore replied, "Human history is filled with such wars. They have a saying, si vis pacem, para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war." They have been preparing for war their entire existence. As if to emphasize the point, another intelligence update arrived. The humans had begun broadcasting on all frequencies, ensuring their message reached every world in the galaxy. "People of the galaxy," Admiral Chin's voice spoke through the translation matrix. "Humanity does not seek conflict, but we will not bow to tyranny. For too long, the Council has imposed its will on free peoples, deciding which species may expand, which may develop, which may live freely. This ends now." The message continued. "We march not in conquest, but in liberation. Any world that wishes to throw off the Council's chains has only to ask, and humanity will stand with you. We go now to the core worlds, not to destroy, but to demand that the Council abandon its age of oppression." The hall fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just a rebellion by one species. The humans were calling for a galactic revolution. "Impossible," whispered the ethereal collective's representative. "They cannot seriously believe they can challenge our entire civilization." But, as the hours passed, more disturbing news arrived. The minor species that humanity had allied with were mobilizing their own fleets. Even more shocking, some of the Council's own member species were beginning to question their loyalty. The Tauri colony worlds had gone silent, refusing to answer Council communications. 3 rim sectors had declared neutrality, saying they would not take sides in the coming conflict. Most terrifying of all, some species were openly supporting the humans. "The situation is deteriorating rapidly," Chancellor Zektar announced. "We must make a decision. Do we negotiate, or do we prepare for war?" The vote, when it came, was closer than anyone had expected. By a narrow margin, the Council chose to mobilize its forces. They would meet the human fleet in battle rather than negotiate with rebels. As the session concluded and representatives hurried away to prepare their worlds for war, few realized they had just witnessed the beginning of the end of the old galactic order. The humans were coming, and they brought with them something the galaxy had never seen before: the idea that freedom was worth fighting for, no matter the odds. In the depths of space, Admiral Chin stood on the bridge of the UNS Determination, watching the stars ahead. Behind her, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled moved through the void. They carried with them not just weapons and ships, but something far more dangerous to the established order: hope. The galaxy would never be the same. Commander Elena Vasquez stood in the war room deep beneath Geneva, watching as holographic displays showed the movement of fleets across known space. Around her, the best military minds humanity had ever produced worked with quiet efficiency, coordinating an operation of unprecedented scale. "Status report." Admiral Chin's voice came through the communication array from the flagship. "All fleets are proceeding on schedule, Admiral," Elena replied. "The second fleet under Admiral Jackson has reached the Kepler sector. The third fleet is approaching the vegan colonies. No resistance yet." What the Galactic Council didn't understand was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for decades. Ever since their first contact with galactic civilization 50 years ago, human leaders had recognized a troubling pattern. The Council spoke of peace and stability, but Their version of peace meant eternal subjugation for younger species. The research had been exhaustive. Human historians, linguists, and xenobiologists had studied every available record of council history. What they found painted a disturbing picture of a stagnant civilization that maintained order through oppression. The council has ruled the galaxy for 3 million years, Dr. Marcus Webb had reported to the Joint Chiefs years earlier. In all that time, they've prevented technological advancement, cultural development, and territorial expansion by any species they deem dangerous. Their definition of dangerous appears to be any species that shows independence or innovation. The Krillian people had been reduced to a single world after showing too much curiosity about hyperspace mathematics. The warrior Dractani had been forced into agricultural service after their military prowess impressed council observers. Dozens of species had been quietly contained, their potential neutered before it could threaten the established order. "We have two choices," Admiral Chun had told the Global Assembly 5 years ago. "Submit to slow death through gradual restriction, or refuse and face immediate war. I prefer the honest conflict." The preparation had been meticulous. Hidden shipyards and asteroid fields had produced vessels using techniques learned from humanity's most destructive conflicts. Unlike the elegant, efficient ships favored by council races, human vessels were built for one purpose: to keep fighting no matter what happened to them. The UNS Defiant, part of Admiral Chen's main force, exemplified human shipbuilding philosophy. Where council ships relied on shields and precise weapons, the Defiant was armored with meter-thick titanium steel composite plating. Its weapons were crude but devastating, kinetic accelerators that could punch through almost any defense, and nuclear torpedo launchers that turned every shot into a potential system killer. But the ships were only part of the story. The real difference was the people inside them. Captain James Murphy commanded the destroyer UNS Relentless, racing toward the Altair system as part of the advance guard. His crew of 200 represented something the galaxy hadn't seen in millennia: warriors who fought not for conquest or glory, but for an idea. "Contact ahead," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the sensor station. "Council Patrol Squadron. 3 ships, hegemony design. Sound battle stations," Murphy ordered calmly. This would be their first real test. "Communications, send the standard message." The message was simple and had been composed by the finest diplomatic minds on Earth. "You are ordered to stand down and withdraw. Humanity claims no authority over you, but we will not be impeded in our mission. Choose wisely." The reply came within minutes. "Unknown vessels, you are in violation of Council space. Reverse course immediately or face destruction." Murphy smiled grimly. "Weapons officer, lock targets. Let's show them what humanity can do." The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, 3 council ships drifted powerless in space, their crews alive, but their vessels completely disabled. The human ships had taken minimal damage and continued on their course without slowing. The engagement was recorded and broadcast across the galaxy within hours. For the first time in recorded history, a young species had not only defied the council, but defeated their forces in open combat. The reaction was immediate and unprecedented. On 100 worlds, populations that had never dared dream of freedom began to whisper about the humans who fought impossible odds. The Council's intelligence networks reported growing unrest in sectors that had been peaceful for thousands of years. On the Krillian homeworld, mathematician Zeknil looked up from calculations that would have been forbidden under Council oversight. For the first time in his species' history, they were free to explore the deepest mysteries of space and time, protected by human ships that had appeared in orbit just hours before. "The humans ask for nothing," he told his research team. "They simply said we are free to pursue knowledge as we see fit. When did anyone last offer such a gift?" Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds. The Tauri agricultural worlds, forced into food production for council species for centuries, suddenly found themselves with a choice. Human diplomats offered protection in exchange for nothing more than the right to exist as equals. "We don't want your worlds," Ambassador Lisa Park told the Tauri Council. "We don't want your resources. We just want you to be free to choose your own path." The concept was so alien to galactic politics that many species initially suspected a trap. The Council always demanded tribute, territory, or submission. Even the best alliances in the galaxy were based on mutual exploitation. But humanity's offer appeared genuine: protection and alliance with no strings attached. As news of these developments reached the Council chambers, panic began to set in. Intelligence Director Quindal of the Oversight Division presented increasingly alarming reports to the emergency sessions that had become daily occurrences. The humans have liberated 17 systems in the past week, he reported. In each case, they've left a small protection force and moved on. They're not conquering, they're actually liberating. The Vorthan ambassador's crystalline form flickered with anxiety. This makes no sense. What do they gain from this? That's the problem, Quindal replied. They don't seem to want to gain anything. They're spreading an ideology, not building an empire. The ideology was simple but revolutionary: self-determination. Humanity believed that every species had the right to choose its own government, develop its own technology, and expand into space according to its own will. The concept was so contrary to Council philosophy that many representatives struggled to understand it. They're creating chaos, declared General Thakmore at an emergency military briefing. If every species believes it has the right to unlimited development and expansion, war will consume the galaxy. Then, perhaps, said Admiral Chen's voice from a captured communication broadcast, the galaxy needs to learn to live with freedom instead of hiding behind artificial peace. The message had been intercepted by Council forces as it was transmitted to the liberation fleets. In it, Admiral Chen outlined humanity's ultimate goals, and they were more radical than the Council had feared. "We don't seek to rule the galaxy," she had said. "We seek to break the chains that have held it back for 3 million years." The Council represents stagnation, fear, and control. Humanity offers progress, courage, and choice. As the human fleets continued their advance toward the core worlds, the galaxy began to change in ways that no one could have predicted. Ancient treaties were being questioned. Long-suppressed technologies were being redeveloped. Species that had been enemies for millennia were finding common ground in their shared desire for freedom. The Draktani warrior clans, reduced to farming communities for 2,000 years, began to remember their heritage. Human military advisors helped them rebuild their warrior traditions while teaching them new concepts like honor in warfare and protection of noncombatants. "Your people once conquered 12 star systems," Colonel Martinez told Warlord Krektan as they reviewed tactical data. "But you fought for conquest. We're teaching you to fight for something better." The concept transformed the Draktani approach to warfare entirely. Instead of mindless aggression, they learned strategic thinking. Instead of brutal conquest, they learned liberation. Within weeks, Draktani volunteer units were serving alongside human forces. Their ancient skills turned toward breaking the chains that bound the galaxy. But the most profound changes were happening in the Council itself. For the first time in millennia, member species were openly questioning the authority they had accepted without thought. The younger species were particularly affected, seeing in humanity's example a path they had never imagined possible. "Why should we accept limits on our expansion?" asked the representative from New Cetacean. "Humanity shows us that growth and development are natural rights." Chancellor Zektar found himself facing the greatest crisis in Council history. The approaching human fleets were dangerous enough, but the spreading revolution of ideas was far worse. Even if they defeated the humans militarily, the concept of freedom had already taken root across the galaxy. As reports continued to arrive of human victories, liberated worlds, and growing rebellion, the Chancellor realized that the old galaxy was ending. What would replace it remained to be seen, but one thing was certain: humanity had changed everything. The war machine they had built was not just ships and weapons, it was an idea that freedom was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. And that idea was spreading faster than their fleets could travel. The massive viewscreen in the UNS Determinations conference room displayed something that would have been impossible just months earlier: representatives from 47 different species, all gathered in common cause. Admiral Chen looked across the faces, some familiar, some utterly alien, of beings who had chosen freedom over security. "The Council fleet has massed at Regulus," reported Admiral Jackson via holographic projection from the Second Fleet. Intelligence estimates 8,000 vessels from 37 member species. They're taking this seriously. The human admiral nodded grimly. 8,000 ships represented the largest military force assembled in galactic history. The Council had called in favors, activated ancient treaties, and mobilized every vessel they could find. Against humanity's combined fleets of 3,000 ships, the odds seemed impossible. But Admiral Chun had learned something important during her decades of military service. Numbers weren't everything. Report from our allies, she requested. General Krektan of the Draktani stepped forward, his massive reptilian form radiating controlled aggression. The warrior clans have committed all available forces. 200 ships and 50,000 ground troops stand ready. The Krillian Science Collective offers 30 research vessels equipped with experimental weapons, added Dr. Zeknil through his translation device. Our defensive calculations suggest Council victory probability decreases with each new variable they must account for. More reports followed. The Tauri had converted agricultural transports into support vessels. The aquatic Benti had modified their ocean world defensive systems for space combat. Even the peaceful Luminari had contributed, offering their advanced medical technology to treat the wounded from all species. Each contribution seemed small against the Council's massive fleet, but together they represented something unprecedented, a true galactic coalition built on shared principles rather than mutual exploitation. There's something else, reported Commander Vasquez from Earth. The intelligence networks are picking up interesting communications from Council space. The data was troubling for the Council and encouraging for the coalition. Member species were questioning their participation in the conflict. Entire sectors were declaring neutrality. Most shocking of all, some Council species were secretly providing intelligence to the human forces. The Eternal Collective has sent us complete tactical specifications for Council ship designs, Vasquez continued. They claim the Council's oppression extends even to founding members. Admiral Chen wasn't entirely surprised. Humanity's intelligence gathering had revealed that the Council's rigid hierarchy oppressed everyone, even species that held positions of authority. The promise of genuine equality was appealing to beings who had spent millennia serving the interests of those above them in the chain of command. What about the hegemony? Asked Captain Torres from the Third Fleet. Any word from their worlds? That's the most interesting development, Vasquez replied. We're receiving fragmentary reports of civil unrest in the hegemony core systems. Apparently, their younger generation has been exposed to human entertainment media through black market channels. This was an unexpected development that worried and amused the human commanders in equal measure. Humanity's cultural exports had been spreading through underground networks for years, despite Council restrictions. Stories of individual heroism, democratic ideals, and personal freedom were apparently having an effect on young minds across the galaxy. Movies and music as weapons of war, mused Admiral Chun. Our entertainment industry would be proud. But the real test was coming. The Council fleet had begun moving from Regulus toward the coalition forces, and preliminary skirmishes were already taking place across a dozen systems. Captain Rebecca Liu commanded the UNS Vigilant in the first major engagement at the Vega system. Her ship, along with 2 destroyers and a Draktani battlecruiser, faced a Council squadron of 12 vessels. They're maintaining standard Council formation, reported her tactical officer. Precise geometric patterns, maximum efficiency. Good, Liu replied. Chaos tends to work better against order. Signal our allies and implement Murphy Protocol. The Murphy Protocol was humanity's answer to the Council's perfect formations and predictable tactics. Named after the ancient military principle that anything that could go wrong would go wrong, it involved deliberately introducing random elements into combat. The human ships began seemingly random maneuvers while the Draktani vessel charged straight at the Council formation, completely ignoring established tactical doctrine. The Council ships, programmed for efficient response to logical threats, struggled to adapt to the chaotic assault. Enemy flagship attempting to establish communication, reported the communications officer. Put them through, Liu ordered. The Council commander appeared on screen, his aquatic features showing obvious frustration. Human vessels, your tactics violate every principle of civilized warfare. You cannot achieve victory through chaos. Watch us, Lu replied. Then, cut the transmission. The battle lasted 3 hours and ended with 8 Council ships disabled and for retreating in disorder. The coalition forces had suffered minor damage to 2 vessels. More importantly, they had recorded the entire engagement and broadcast it across the galaxy. The psychological impact was enormous. For 3 million years, the Council's military supremacy had been unquestioned. Their ships were technological marvels, their crews highly trained, their tactics refined through countless conflicts. But they had never faced an enemy that refused to play by established rules. The humans fight like madmen, reported the defeated Council commander in his after-action report. They seem to embrace disorder as a tactical advantage. This assessment spread through the Council fleet with devastating effect on morale. Species that had never questioned their military doctrine suddenly found themselves wondering if their approach to warfare was fundamentally flawed. Meanwhile, the coalition continued to grow. The battle at Vega had inspired 6 more species to join the rebellion, and intelligence suggested that at least 20 Council member species were considering defection. The situation is beyond our worst projections, Intelligence Director Quindal reported to an emergency Council session. The humans aren't just winning battles, they're changing the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. Chancellor Zektar studied the tactical displays showing coalition fleet movements. The humans and their allies were advancing on multiple fronts, but their strategy was unlike anything in recorded military history. Instead of seeking decisive battles or strategic objectives, they appeared to be spreading their forces thin across hundreds of systems. What are they doing? He wondered aloud. This deployment makes no strategic sense. General Thakmore had been wondering the same thing until a disturbing report from the Rim territories provided the answer. Chancellor, I believe they're not trying to defeat us militarily. They're trying to liberate the entire galaxy simultaneously. The implications were staggering. Instead of conquering territory to deny it to the enemy, the coalition was freeing worlds to remove them from Council control. Each liberated system became a recruitment center for new allies and a supply base for continued operations. They're not fighting a war, Quindal said with growing horror. They're conducting a revolution. The revolutionary nature of the conflict became clear when reports arrived from the newly liberated worlds. Instead of installing puppet governments or demanding tribute, the coalition forces were simply removing Council oversight and encouraging local self-governance. On Kepler-4, the Human Liberation Force had consisted of exactly 12 Marines and 1 diplomatic officer. They had landed, formally declared the world free from Council authority, helped the locals establish a provisional government, and departed, leaving only a communication device for requesting assistance if needed. It's unprecedented, reported the Council observer who had been allowed to document the liberation. They're creating independent worlds, not conquered territories. The strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. Each liberated world became a symbol of what life could be like without Council control. The inhabitants, free to pursue their own interests for the first time in generations, became enthusiastic supporters of the coalition cause. More importantly, the liberated worlds began developing new technologies and cultural innovations at an unprecedented pace. Without Council restrictions on research and development, scientific advances were occurring in months that would normally take decades. The Krillians have developed a new form of faster-than-light communication, reported Dr. Angela Foster, Humanities Chief Science Officer. The Tauri have created agricultural techniques that could feed half the galaxy. The Luminari have discovered medical treatments that could extend lifespans across multiple species. These innovations were being shared freely among coalition members, creating a technological renaissance that made the ancient Council knowledge seem primitive by comparison. The promise of unlimited scientific and cultural development was proving even more attractive than military protection. As the coalition fleets continued their advance toward the core worlds, they carried with them not just weapons and soldiers, but the dreams of countless beings who had never dared imagine a galaxy where freedom was possible. The old order was crumbling, and something entirely new was taking its place. The question was no longer whether the coalition could defeat the Council's military forces. It was whether the Council could survive the revolution of ideas that humanity had unleashed. Chancellor Zektar stared at the tactical displays showing coalition advances on a dozen fronts. And, for the first time in his long career, he wondered if the galaxy's 3 million-year age of order was coming to an end. The core system of Galacticus Prime had never known the presence of hostile fleets. For 3 million years, it had stood as the untouchable center of galactic civilization, surrounded by layers of defenses that made attack seem impossible. Now, Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the UNS Determination, watching as the greatest stronghold in the galaxy prepared for war. Final sensor sweep complete, reported Commander Harrison. The Council has assembled everything they have. 12,000 ships in defensive formation around Galacticus Prime, orbital defense platforms, asteroid fortresses, and what appears to be some kind of planetary shield generator. The Coalition fleet had grown during its march to the core. What had started as 3,000 human ships now numbered over 8,000 vessels from 93 different species. Beings who had never imagined themselves as warriors now flew alongside humanity's finest, united by a shared vision of freedom. Signal from the surface, reported the communications officer. Chancellor Zektar is requesting direct communication. Put him through, Admiral Chun ordered. The holographic projection of the Chancellor appeared in the center of the bridge. His 4 arms were held in what human intelligence recognized as a gesture of formal respect, but his expression showed the strain of recent events. Admiral Chun, he began. I speak for the Galactic Council in offering terms for the cessation of hostilities. I'm listening, Chancellor, Chun replied. The Council is prepared to grant humanity expanded territorial rights and reduced oversight in exchange for an end to this rebellion. Your species has proven its strength. There is no need for further bloodshed. Admiral Chun studied the alien leader for a long moment before responding. Chancellor, I don't think you understand what we're fighting for. This isn't about territorial rights or reduced oversight. We're here to end the Council's authority over free peoples entirely. The Chancellor's features showed what humans had learned to recognize as shock. Admiral, you cannot seriously intend to destroy 3 million years of galactic civilization. Not destroy, Chun corrected. Transform. The galaxy doesn't need rulers, Chancellor. It needs communities working together as equals. Impossible, Zektar said with growing agitation. Without central authority, the galaxy will collapse into chaos and war. Maybe, Admiral Chen admitted. Or maybe it will become something better than anything your council ever imagined. The transmission ended with the Chancellor looking stunned by humanity's absolute refusal to negotiate a return to the old order. Within hours, the Council fleet began moving into attack formation. The Battle of Galacticus Prime began with a display of firepower that lit up space for light years in every direction. The Council's opening barrage was a masterpiece of coordinated assault, with 12,000 ships firing in perfect synchronization at predetermined targets. But the Coalition fleet wasn't where the targeting computers expected it to be. Ghost Fleet Protocol is in effect, Admiral Chen announced to all Coalition forces. Remember, we're not here to destroy their ability to fight. We're here to show them a better way to live. The Ghost Fleet Protocol was humanity's most radical military innovation. Instead of meeting force with force, the Coalition ships used their combined technological advantages to simply avoid being where the enemy expected them to be. Human stealth technology, combined with Krillian mathematics and Dractani intuitive tactics, created a fluid defensive strategy that the rigid Council formations couldn't counter. Enemy forces are attempting to establish firing solutions, reported the tactical officer aboard the UNS Determination. Their targeting systems can't lock onto our fleet. This was the result of months of technological sharing among Coalition species. Each race had contributed their unique scientific achievements to create advantages that no single species could have developed alone. The Luminari had provided sensor masking technology that made ships effectively invisible to Council detection systems. The aquatic Benti had shared their understanding of fluid dynamics, allowing Coalition ships to move through space like schools of fish, unpredictable and constantly shifting. The Council fleet's second barrage was even more devastating than the first, but it struck empty space while Coalition forces appeared behind their formations, delivering precise strikes against weapon systems and engines. Disable, don't destroy. Admiral Chen's orders echoed across the coalition fleet. Every ship that surrenders is a potential ally. This approach confused and demoralized the Council forces. They had prepared for a battle of annihilation, expecting the coalition to attempt the total destruction of their fleet. Instead, they found themselves systematically disarmed while suffering minimal casualties. Council flagship is hailing us, reported the communications officer. General Thakmore appeared on the view screen, his reptilian features showing obvious frustration. Admiral Chun, your tactics are unconventional. General, Chun replied, we're not trying to defeat you. We're trying to free you. Free us from what? From the same chains that have bound every species in this galaxy for 3 million years. The chains of a system that prevents growth, exploration, and development in the name of stability. The general was quiet for a long moment. And what would you replace our system with? Nothing, Admiral Chen said simply. We want to replace central authority with local self-determination. Every world chooses its own government, develops its own technology, pursues its own dreams. That's anarchy, Thakmore protested. No, Chen corrected. That's freedom. As the battle continued, something unprecedented began happening throughout the Council fleet. Individual ships started breaking formation, not to retreat, but to cease fighting entirely. Crews that had served the Council loyally for centuries were beginning to question their purpose. The turning point came when the Eternal Collective's flagship, the ancient vessel Timeless Wisdom, suddenly powered down its weapons and broke from the Council formation. This is Consciousness Prime of the Eternal Collective, came the transmission on all frequencies. We withdraw from this conflict. The humans speak truth about the nature of freedom. The psychological impact was devastating. The Eternal Collective was one of the Council's founding species, their loyalty considered absolutely certain. If they were abandoning the fight, what did it mean for everyone else? We've been wrong, Prime continued. For 3 million years, we've maintained order by preventing change. We've preserved peace by crushing hope. The humans show us what we could have become if we hadn't chosen stagnation over growth. More ships began standing down. The precise formations that had been the Council's greatest strength became a liability as vessels throughout the fleet began acting independently. Some continued fighting, others retreated, and still others switched sides entirely. Admiral Chun watched the chaos spreading through the enemy fleet and realized they had achieved something impossible. They hadn't just won a battle. They had won a war of ideas. All coalition forces cease offensive operations, she ordered. Offer assistance to any Council vessels that request it. The order was shocking to military minds trained in traditional warfare, but it perfectly embodied humanity's revolutionary approach to conflict. Instead of pressing their advantage, they offered mercy to their enemies. The response was immediate. Disabled Council ships began accepting coalition assistance. Medical teams from the Luminari worked alongside human engineers to repair damaged vessels. Drakhtani warriors helped evacuate crew members from ships that had suffered critical damage. Chancellor Zektar watched from the surface of Galacticus Prime as his fleet dissolved around him. Ships that had been loyal to the Council for millennia were now working alongside their former enemies, sharing technology and resources as equals. Chancellor, came a voice from behind him. He turned to see Admiral Chun materializing in the Council chambers through a transport beam. Admiral, he said wearily, have you come to accept our surrender? I've come to offer you something better, Chun replied. Partnership? I don't understand. Admiral Chen gestured toward the view screen showing the mixed fleet in orbit above them. Look at what they're accomplishing together. Council technology combined with coalition innovation, all focused on helping each other instead of maintaining control over each other. But without central authority, the galaxy will learn to govern itself, Chen finished. Species will form voluntary alliances based on mutual benefit rather than forced compliance. Technology will advance faster than ever before. And, yes, there will probably be conflicts, but they'll be resolved by free peoples making free choices. The Chancellor looked at the display showing former enemies working together in space above them. And if this experiment in freedom fails, then we'll try something else, Admiral Chun said with a smile. That's what freedom means, the right to make mistakes and learn from them. As if to emphasize her point, a new transmission came from the fleet above. Dr. Zeknil of the Krillians and Professor Talvan of the Council's Science Division were jointly announcing a breakthrough in hyperspace theory that would revolutionize interstellar travel. Working together, we've solved problems that have puzzled our species for millennia, Dr. Zeknil reported. This is what becomes possible when knowledge is shared instead of restricted. Chancellor Zektar stared at the display, watching beings from dozens of species working together with an enthusiasm and creativity he had never seen during the long years of council rule. Perhaps, he thought, there was indeed something better than the order they had maintained for so long. The Battle of Galacticus Prime was over, but the transformation of the galaxy had only just begun. 5 years after the Battle of Galacticus Prime, Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the observation deck of the research station New Horizons, watching something that would have been impossible under the old galactic order. Ships from over 200 different species moved freely through space, their crews working together on projects that pushed the boundaries of science and exploration. The Galactic Assembly is ready to begin session, announced her aide, Lieutenant Commander Park. Chun nodded and made her way to the central amphitheater where representatives from across the galaxy had gathered for their annual meeting. Unlike the rigid hierarchy of the old council, the Assembly was a voluntary organization where every species had an equal voice, regardless of their size, technology level, or military power. The chair recognizes Dr. Zeknil of the Krillian Collective, announced the session moderator, a young human diplomat who had learned to speak 17 different alien languages. The Krillian scientist stepped forward, his excitement obvious even through the translation matrix. Fellow beings, I bring news that will change our understanding of the universe itself. The amphitheater fell silent as Dr. Zeknil began to explain the breakthrough that had consumed the past 5 years of collaborative research. Working with human physicists, eternal collective mathematicians, and luminary energy specialists, the joint research team had discovered what they called dimensional bridging, a method of traveling not just between stars, but between entirely different universes. The implications are beyond our current ability to comprehend, Dr. Zeknil continued. We stand at the threshold of infinite exploration, infinite knowledge, and infinite possibilities for growth. Admiral Chin smiled as she listened to the excited discussions that followed. This was exactly what humanity had hoped to achieve when they first challenged the Council's authority. The galaxy had become a place where curiosity was encouraged rather than suppressed, where innovation flourished rather than being controlled by central authority. The transformation had not been without challenges. In the first year after the Council's dissolution, 17 different conflicts had erupted as species settled old grievances or competed for resources. But instead of the brutal, endless wars that the Council had predicted, these conflicts were resolved through negotiation, mediation, and compromise. The hegemony and Vorthan Christarchs have reached agreement on the disputed mining rights in the Crab Nebula, reported Ambassador Liu during the Assembly's conflict resolution session. Both sides will share the resources and jointly develop the extraction technology. This had become the pattern throughout the new galaxy. Rather than fighting over limited resources, species were learning to work together to expand those resources. The technological advances made possible by open scientific cooperation had solved problems that had seemed impossible under the old system. Next item, the moderator announced. The proposal from New Earth for the Deep Space Exploration Initiative. Admiral Chin stepped forward to present humanity's latest ambitious project. Fellow species of the galaxy, we propose a joint expedition beyond the edge of known space, using our new dimensional bridging technology to explore what lies in the vast emptiness between galaxies. The proposal would have been unthinkable under Council rule. Exploration beyond established boundaries had been strictly forbidden for fear that it might lead to contact with unknown threats or the discovery of resources that could destabilize the galactic order. The expedition would include representatives from any species that wishes to participate, Chen continued. Knowledge gained would be shared freely with all members of the Assembly. We go not as conquerors or claim stackers, but as explorers seeking to understand our place in the larger universe. The discussion that followed was passionate and engaged. Some species expressed concern about the risks involved, while others were excited by the possibilities. But, unlike the old council's debates, where fear and caution dominated every decision, the Assembly's discussions were driven by hope and curiosity. The Draktani clans volunteer our finest warriors to protect the expedition, declared General Krektan. Though we have learned that true strength comes from defending others' right to explore, not conquering new territories for ourselves. The transformation of the Draktani exemplified the changes that had swept across the galaxy. Once a warrior culture focused on conquest and domination, they had evolved into something unique, protectors of freedom and exploration. Their ships now served as escorts for scientific expeditions and peaceful trading missions, their warrior traditions redirected toward defending the principles of the new galactic civilization. The Luminari offer our healing technologies, added prime healers and our. If we are to venture into the unknown, we must be prepared to help any beings we encounter, whether they are peaceful or hostile. Similar offers came from dozens of other species. The aquatic Benti would provide their expertise in surviving hostile environments. The mechanical Forgeborn would contribute their skills in maintaining equipment in extreme conditions. Even former council loyalists like the Ethereal Collective were enthusiastic supporters. We have spent eons trying to understand the nature of existence, spoke the collective's representative. Perhaps the answers lie not in our meditation chambers, but in the vast spaces between the stars. As the Assembly voted on the exploration proposal, Admiral Chun reflected on how much had changed since that first defiant message humanity had sent to the Council. The galaxy had indeed become chaotic by the old standards. Species were constantly developing new technologies, forming new alliances, and pursuing new dreams. But it was a creative chaos, a dynamic growth that had already surpassed anything achieved during the 3 million years of Council rule. The exploration proposal passed by an overwhelming margin, with only 3 species abstaining and none opposed. Within hours, volunteer crews were being assembled from across the galaxy, their excitement palpable as they prepared for humanity's greatest adventure. But the expedition was only one example of what the new galaxy had accomplished. Former agricultural worlds were now centers of learning and innovation. Species that had been barely surviving under Council restrictions were becoming major contributors to galactic civilization. The Tauri had developed agricultural techniques that could support populations on previously uninhabitable worlds. The formerly oppressed silicates had created new forms of architecture that turned entire asteroids into beautiful living spaces. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Park approached with a message pad. Communication from Earth. President Martinez wants to know if you'll accept the appointment as Earth's first galactic ambassador. Chen considered the offer carefully. The position would be largely ceremonial. Humanity no longer needed special representation in galactic affairs, as humans now served alongside aliens in every field of endeavor. But it would be a way to ensure that the principles they had fought for would continue to guide galactic development. Tell the president I'll consider it, she replied. But first, I want to see how this exploration mission turns out. As if summoned by her words, Dr. Foster approached with preliminary reports from the dimensional bridging test. Admiral, you're going to want to see this. Our initial probe has returned with some extraordinary data. The probe's recordings showed glimpses of something that defied comprehension. Vast structures of unknown origin floating in the void between galaxies, clearly artificial but built on a scale that dwarfed anything in known space. There's civilization out there, Dr. Foster said quietly. Advanced beyond anything we can imagine. And, if our calculations are correct, they've been waiting for someone to discover dimensional bridging technology. Admiral Chen stared at the images, feeling the same excitement that had driven humanity to challenge the Council in the first place. The universe was vast and full of wonders that no single species could discover alone. But, working together, sharing knowledge and dreams, the beings of their galaxy might be capable of anything. Prepare the expedition ships, she ordered. It's time to find out what else is possible. As the assembly session concluded and representatives began making preparations for the greatest exploration mission in galactic history, Admiral Chen looked out at the stars and smiled. Humanity had set out to win freedom for their species, and had ended up helping to free an entire galaxy. But now it appeared their real adventure was just beginning. The old galaxy had been ruled by fear of the unknown. The new galaxy embraced it, and somewhere in the vast spaces between the stars, something was waiting to welcome them to an even larger community of free beings. The age of the Council was over. The age of infinite possibilities had begun. As Admiral Chun made her way back to the UNS Determination, now serving as the flagship for the exploration fleet, she carried with her the hopes and dreams of billions of beings who had learned that freedom was not just worth fighting for, it was worth living for. The galaxy would never be the same. And, for the first time in 3 million years, that was exactly what everyone wanted.